Hi, I'm here with Gwen Rose Barringer.
Hi,
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you. So, let me get my notes together. You might have to edit this some.
Um,
uh, but anyway, hi, I run a podcast called A Light for Erica, and I research missing persons cases, hoping to eventually find some of them and return them home to their families and loved ones. So,
what started you on this journey?
well, honestly, it kind of goes a little far back. My biological mother was technically not a legally missing person, but she was, in a sense, missing. She dipped out, chose alcohol over motherhood, and I looked for her off and on for about 15 years, and I finally found her back in 2015. And surprisingly, she's alive and well, and just basically was so damn guilty that she just never returned to the life that she'd started to build.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so I guess in a sense, I know what it's like to miss a loved one and not to know where they are and to sort of experience that pain.
So,
And
sorry to interrupt you. Out of curiosity, so did she just dip out essentially and start a whole new life?
in a sense, yes, but also no. She fought her demons to the point where she could survive without alcohol, but at the same time, I wouldn't exactly call her life thriving. She stays in her bubble. She's very isolated. I'm sure COVID is really no big deal for her. It's just another day in the life because she doesn't really interact with all that many people. She
Okay,
just kind of became a hermit.
okay. I feel like everybody's a hermit right now.
Right, right. But she was one before all of this started, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess I'm able to kind of identify with that sort of, sense of just helplessness. And I don't like feeling helpless any more than the next person. So
Right. Okay. So, what was the first case that struck you?
honestly, right after I found my mom, I got added to this Facebook group called Help Find Caitlin Akins. And I was like, well, who is Caitlin Akins? And I actually found her case, but it was based on the East Coast. And I figured since I lived on the West Coast, I couldn't really do much more than just share her story and just, bring her up to people and then have people looking at me weird because that's all the way off on the East Coast. What the hell are you talking about? But so that was kind of the first case that gripped me and kind of made me realize that I empathized with these families quite a bit. And I've actually stayed in that group since early 2016. And I constantly kind of, keep track of how things are going with that investigation. Unfortunately, it has stalled. And I even sent her case and started researching her case and sent it over to a fairly well known YouTuber named John Lorden, who hosts the Lorden Arts YouTube channel. And he took the research that I compiled and was like, hey, this is actually like, you did a really good job on this. This is really thorough. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit more about the fact that I could have some sort of skill set I hadn't tapped into yet as far as researching these sorts of things.
Awesome. When I hear about these kind of things, I hope I'm not pronouncing her name or remembering incorrectly. There was a case a long, long time ago. Obviously, I don't know if it was like the 70s or the 80s. I read the book. Casey Dugard, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read her book, and that struck me. I grew up always being told, like by my family, like if you go down that driveway and you see a van, you run the other way. And not specifically about women and girls getting kidnapped, but unfortunately, a lot of the cases that I see are women and girls getting kidnapped. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the way it is. But men get kidnapped as well. Um, But anywho, that story was one of the first that struck me. And there was a movie that I watched. I've watched it actually twice now. It's called Room. And I always wondered if it was about based on Casey Dugard's story. It's just insane to me. There was a girl and then a woman trapped in a room by a family. In the movie, it was a man, but it was similar for years. And she's just in somebody's neighborhood, in somebody's backyard, and
Mm-hmm.
her family's looking for her, and she's in somebody's backyard. I don't know how long it was. I want to say it was at least 15, 20 years, maybe longer. But it's insane. Somebody could be looking and they could be right next door. There could be somebody
Right.
in a house next door that's captive there. There was
Mm-hmm.
also a family that they were keeping their kids captive or something and they weren't feeding them. And that's the crazy thing here is nobody would know.
Yeah.
You have no idea if your neighbor had somebody, in their backyard like captive, and that's why it's so difficult to locate people. So I think it's awesome. There are people that don't give up on these things because some of these people have been rescued because of people like you, people that care.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I mean, I also kind of try to focus more so on a lot of cases that don't get a lot of media attention and don't get a lot of police presence, as it were. Like Erica Hogue, for example, she's part of why I started this endeavor. Like, I found a case that was local that I felt like I could do something about, and I felt like I could contribute to. And she basically lived on the fringes of society. She was a traveler, part of the Rainbow family, the bunch of hippies that hold the gatherings in the summertime and just, love and light, all of that. There is a darker side to the Rainbow family, but, for all intents and purposes, she was about that whole love and light life. And so for her to go missing and not be noticed, like I didn't even know that she was missing until December of 2018. And at that point, she had been missing since May. Since freaking May. Hold on, I need to make my phone stop making noise. I have a group chat that is going insane right now and it needs to not. But at any rate, she lived on the fringes of society and lived in such a way that when she did go missing, a lot of people just sort of generally assumed, oh, she's off doing some soul searching. She's off on some sort of hippie-tastic adventure, And it wasn't until months later when I actually looked up her case to see how things were progressing, and an article stated that she had schizophrenia. And that was a
Oh.
big warning sign to me because not only do you have somebody who's kind of a free spirit, but if they're dealing with such a severe mental illness, there is a very increased chance that they could get into some sort of trouble. And I went, why is it taking this long for the cops to be serious about this? What's really like what's going on here? Like why isn't there anyone trying to do something? And even though the case did get transferred to the Oregon State Police in October of 2019, the OSP has basically labeled it inactive, and they're no longer actively looking into her disappearance. And that just breaks my heart because I've spoken with her sister. I've heard the pain in her sister's voice, and I just could not imagine being states away and wanting to help, but having, your own kids to take care of and things like that. Your own shit to deal with. You've got a lot on your plate already. It's just I needed to do something.
Is there any initial place where it was just even assumed that she would have went missing, like a pinpointed area that she could have went? I know you're wording it like she was kind of off doing her own thing.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as possibilities, she disappeared from Selma, Oregon. And Selma is a very, rural area. And the spot that she did disappear from was really tucked away in the woods off a road that's like miles from the highway.
And
And
anybody, sorry to interrupt, anybody who's been to certain areas in Oregon, Northern California, even, Washington, you know, been in the woods, anywhere out woods, is like, oh man, it would be really easy for someone to just go missing here. I made jokes about that.
Yeah, exactly. And just so there's a possibility she could have headed up to like Bend. A possibility because her children live up there with their father or some other relative. I'm not super clear on who's got custody of who. You don't necessarily ask too hard about the children if they're not with the missing person because that's an invasion of their privacy, Which is why even in pictures of Erica with her children that I've posted on my Facebook page, I have, I've blacked out her children's faces and just, made it so that they can't be identified because
Right.
that's just, rude.
So, as far as the family goes, have they said, like, gratitude, like, for you sharing her pictures and all, everything in that sort of way, like thank you. Not that I'm, I know you're not expecting that, but have they said anything to you?
Yeah, no, her sister's been really just kind and helpful, as much as she can be. She's not from this area, so she's like when I asked about specific places that were searched, her head was in such a flurry that, she wasn't entirely remembering the names of certain places all that well, and that's understandable, not from around here. It took me a minute to realize that when she said Indian Mountain, she meant Squaw Mountain, for example. Things like that. But I mean, she's been very, very kind, very grateful. Haven't really spoken much to the rest of Erica's family just because due to her mental illness, she had distanced herself considerably from them after she lost custody of her children.
Okay.
So it's a very delicate familial situation as well. And while there are reasons why she wouldn't reach out to specific family members, her sister Rachel, the one that I've been in contact with, is somebody that she was in constant contact with.
Okay. So
So
how old was she? She went missing.
she was 39 years old,
Okay.
almost 40. And I feel like that's another reason why maybe the media and police didn't necessarily pick up and run her story as much as you typically would see, because typically the media tends to focus on the young, pretty women with bright futures ahead of them,
Yeah,
who just vanish into thin air. Like it's even common in the true crime community.
I
For
noticed
example,
that.
for every John Benet Ramsey, for every Maura Murray, there's at least half a dozen other people whose names just get completely forgotten about. People like Erica who lived lives on the outskirts of society.
I just think it's fantastic that you care about this. Like I couldn't imagine if, a loved one or even myself like went missing, because it doesn't mean that the person is deceased necessarily. And I feel like that's what's always jumped to. Like
Yeah.
that person could very well still be alive. And
And even
someone
if that person is deceased, their family deserves that closure in knowing.
absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. Could we possibly see Erica?
Absolutely. Let me pull up some photos of her real fast. Give me just a second. We're going to share the screen and make sure I have it all together. And share. All right, so this is Erica Hogue. She went missing on May 17th, 2018 from Selma. And she was just about to turn 40. She was 39, almost 40 at the time that she disappeared. It's really weird. Her clothing description, for example, was this vest right here that you can see. A green hooded zip-up vest with white trim and 2 pockets and purple moccasins. No pants, because no one can clarify how well clothed she was when she supposedly just wandered off. But there's her pot leaf tattoo on her arm.
It's just being from Oregon.
Right? She's not even from Oregon, man. She's from freaking Utah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she just kind of wound up here. to trim and work on a pot farm.
Okay.
That's another reason why, you know, she's not that well known by locals, because she was just kind of passing through, but she attended all of the Rainbow Family events and stuff like that. But there's really not a whole lot of information, as you can see. She was last seen walking in the 7800th block of Deer Creek Road and has never been heard from again. Her family describes her as an adventurous woman who's dropped out of sight before on impromptu trips, and she's also been homeless before. And that's part of why I do believe that there is a decent chance that she could, you know, be out there and just not in her right mind. I'm not saying it's 100% or anything. Like
Right.
it's probably a pretty even split between the likelihood of her being dead versus her being just cuckoo bananas and, you know, elsewhere.
Well, as you said, at least, you know, it, there would be closure. Like, even if you knew
Exactly.
she's out there wandering bananas, or she is deceased or something. And I think the feeling of uncomfortability comes from the person never being found, you know. And I've sat and watched YouTube videos. Like, I go on my creep fest session where I'm watching like scary videos, and I'll click on ones like top 10 scary missing cases of people, and I see these people. Like, I saw, there's a famous one, this guy that was being chased. He was last seen getting running through an airport or something, and he ran into the woods, and they never saw him again. And I think,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't remember his name because there's a couple like that, but I do remember the footage of them that they
Yes.
showed of him just running through this area.
And the example there is, I feel like the reason that we feel the way that we feel is like the person was just never found. There was no body, there was nothing. And it's a very strange feeling, like almost the feeling of you're walking around your house and I lost something, I know it's here, or you know, but it's not here. And it's strange, it's really strange. I think
Yeah.
this was somebody that was found. There was one case that I tell everybody about. This case bothered me the most, but but she was found, unfortunately. Lisa Lamb.
Oh yeah, Elisa Lamb.
You're like, oh, Lisa Lamb. No, that
That still is just kind
this,
of mind-boggling,
I got
honestly.
goosebumps. Sorry. That case always gives me goosebumps. But the thing is, she could have not been found, and the footage of her she's seen looking around in an elevator the last time she was seen, and it is just very spooky, the things that she's doing. Like, you just see her in an elevator, like moving her hands all weird, and she keeps looking around the corner. And then they found her in a water tank. Like,
Mhm.
that's the thing though, you never know where somebody could be, and that's their spooky thing to
Exactly.
me.
Like, I've heard everything about Erica, from her, you know, just living in Portland homeless, to her body being used as fertilizer for somebody's pot farm.
Where did you hear that one from?
Uh, a couple of hippie types who just kind of, I'm not 100% sure how legit their information is. It was just based on vibes that they got from her boyfriend. Nothing concrete.
Okay.
Vibes.
Is there anything known about him? Like, could he be
Well, see, that's kind of where a lot of people's fingers are pointed, and I want to speak with him before giving, you know, a firm assessment on this matter, but
right?
getting in touch with the guy has been very hard. His name is Larry Anthony Hopkins II. He goes by Hannibal, which on the surface, spooky, but also you got to think Anthony Hopkins is in his name. I
Right.
mean, I'd probably try to come up with some sort of sweet nickname too if I had that name. But yeah, and he was kind of, you know, a fellow traveling type. He and Erica met, I want to say, about 2 years before she disappeared, sometime in 2016, maybe 2015. I don't exactly recall, but they just kind of, you know, traveled around, smoked a bunch of weed, occasionally did some meth, did some LSD, this and that. And, you know, they had their troubles like every other couple who dabbles in drugs tends to. And he he was the person that called her sister and told her sister to file a missing persons report because Erica had supposedly just wandered off. So he was the person who got the ball rolling, and by all rights and means, he could have just continued to leave her as, a technically but not legally missing person and not contacted her family for weeks. But instead, he stepped up right away. So that's a little bit confusing. Either you're trying to hide something or you're actually being honest, you know? And he did assist in the search for the first, while that it was going on. He, was just kind of generally helpful to law enforcement. And they even noted in the police report, OSP did, that he was helpful and accommodating. And so that's good on the surface. But then flash forward to April of 2019, and he's getting busted for driving while suspended or erratically or something, or reckless endangerment. That's what it was, reckless driving, and meth possession. And so then shortly after he was released in April of 2019, he magically finds some of Erica's belongings on the property that she disappeared from. Yeah. I see you sitting back. That's kind of what I did when I kind of made that connection as well. So he called the investigators immediately and called Erica's family and was like, "Look, I found her bong and her lanyard, like just off of at the edge of the property out here. You need to come check this out. We need to look for her." And so they did another search of the property and didn't find her, didn't find, anything else belonging to her. Just these things that people swear that she wouldn't have left behind willingly. And so it just doesn't add up, and I can't get a clear enough reading. I've heard some horrible things about the guy, but I mean, you're gonna hear horrible things about somebody who dabbles in meth and has the nickname Hannibal.
And you can't always jump to the obvious, obvious or not, suspicion, because as we know and see, most of the time when someone goes missing, like, it is by someone they know, but it also cannot be by somebody you know. Like, what if it's just nobody that anybody would know, suspect?
Exactly.
Somebody that she didn't even know.
Yeah.
You would.
Somebody who offered her a ride.
Yep. And unfortunately, the Oregon highways, I hate this word, it's a dirty word. They're notorious for sex trafficking. I'm sure that you know that too. And they're women, children, men, kidnapped and taken up to Portland, and then from there, God knows where, and being sex trafficked. I am thankful there is awareness there, because everybody that I've talked to about that, they know about that. They're well aware.
Right. But the thing is, we all know about it. What the hell are we doing about it?
Right.
And that's kind of the caveat there, honestly. That's kind of where you get a little stuck, because you don't know how to approach it and what to do about it.
Well, a crazy story I have myself is I went camping a couple years ago, and it was right by the highway, the campground. We were sitting by the fire, and we heard a little girl start screaming, and it was clear as day. A little girl started screaming, and there was like an abandoned store next door, but you could hear the highway nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I heard something, or somebody's kids at the campground are screaming, what's going on? And then all of a sudden we heard it again.
Right.
And it sounded like a girl was just screaming for life. And it literally, like, we looked at each other, and I had goosebumps, and there was something, I had this weird feeling, and we both this was not smart. We got in the car, and we headed toward the noise. That was not smart of us. I know that.
I mean, two of you is better than one.
Yeah. But we went toward the noise, and I could still hear it. And the scary thing is we kept driving, and we could still hear the noise. It started getting fainter and fainter, and that's what bothers me. And it eventually went away. It fainter and fainter and fainter, like quieter and quieter and quieter. And we were screaming, like, hello, like trying to help. We went back to the campground. We let the owners know, and they said, like, do you want to call the police? And I was like, what are you asking me if I want to call the police? Like, but they kind of made the statement, and kind of raised my goosebumps. So, like, there's kids screaming out, you can hear kids from the highway, people get kidnapped on the highway all the time. There's nothing that we can do about it. And they said
Mhm.
that, and I remember that clear as day. And
Mhm.
the whole rest of the night, I just could not stop thinking about it.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely.
That
Human
was 2 years
trafficking is a
ago.
very real thing.
Yep, that was 2 years ago.
Shit.
Uh-huh. Right by the highway.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes on around here. I mean, for example, one of the first cases that I kind of touched on, that was local, was a Jane Doe that was found in 1971 off of Redwood Highway. And she was called Annie Doe for the longest time because she had a reddish hair, was what they could determine. It was like a reddish or an auburn color. Obviously her remains were skeletal at that time, so the hair was kind of sun bleached, but the reddish tint was there. And so she sat in the Oregon State Medical Examiner's office up until sometime in late 2018, when an organization called the DNA Doe Project, they were able to extract some DNA from her bones. It took 2 or 3 rounds of testing, I do believe. I know that I contributed donations to each and every single round every time I saw a post that they did about her. And they ended up getting enough DNA to determine some of her family history, and from there kind of build a tree to hopefully identify her. And they finally found her identity. Her name was Annie Lehman. So, fun fact, her name had actually been Annie. They'd been calling her by the correct name for all these years. And she had been a runaway, which is why she'd never been reported missing. She'd left a kind of toxic family situation, seen her sister. Her sister said that she had left with an older woman and was never seen again. And the story that her sister's husband later found out after he kind of hired a private investigator to look into the matter was that there was a possibility that Annie had been sold into sex trafficking, even back in 1971.
From my understanding, it wasn't, people going missing wasn't talked about very much. Like in the 50s, it wasn't even like a real thing, and then all of a sudden it started happening when you started
Yeah,
seeing kids on the back of milk cartons.
60s and 70s were kind of, a big heyday for serial killers because of the whole free love thing. Kids would just go off on these grand adventures, never be heard from again. Their families just assumed that the kid was, off up to no good, following the Grateful Dead, whatever. It's these older cases especially also just kind of hit me in the feelings
Oh yeah,
because it's been so damn long since anyone's heard from these people, and a lot of the times a lot of their family members have passed on. As far as Annie Lehman's concerned, her sister was still alive, her brother's still alive, her parents died without ever knowing what happened to her, and that just breaks my heart.
something else that comes to my mind is, agree, disagree, whatever. The undocumented immigrants that come to not only this nation, other nations, and you're kind of bringing up people being able to be found a little bit easier, I'd imagine, because they have some way of being traced.
Mm-hmm.
These people that are undocumented, there's almost no way of them being traced. They're
No,
not supposed to be in a certain area in the first place.
there are ways to trace, these sorts of individuals as far as, genetic genealogy is concerned, though, what the DNA Doe Project does, because they'll take it far back. They'll take it far back to the 1920s, 1910s, things like that, and try to build from that point, because they'll take your third or fourth or fifth cousin, for example, and construct their tree, and then construct a tree adjacent to theirs, and see if you got any matches from this particular doe from that tree. So it's not impossible, but it's certainly harder.
Right. It's just, we have to be thankful for science. Like Science is amazing in that way, that it's
Well,
helping us do so many things, you know, like finding missing people. I just have sympathy for undocumented people, for people, you know, that are having that it's more difficult to trace them.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
then, you know, people stop looking, and it makes me feel like, okay, maybe it's because people want to start forgetting to heal wounds, or people, you know, in the case of the gal that you were first talking about, like, you know, she was off doing who knows what, and they might have thought that she, just because she had had her lifestyle of doing whatever she wanted, they didn't have a reason to look for her right off the bat. And there's probably many like her, like, oh, she's a traveler, she's doing whatever. There's not a huge reason to
Mm-hmm.
look for her, because maybe looking at the beginning would have helped more. And it's a
Or
hindsight of
yeah,
a thought, but
or they're an addict, for
yes,
example. They're off on a binge somewhere. They'll be back.
right.
You know, things of that nature. It's honestly, it's just so messed up. And you also actually brought another point to my mind when you were talking about the undocumented immigrants situation and things of that nature, and how hard it would be to identify them. Adoptees.
Oh, I'm interested to hear your take on this.
If you're Jane or you're John Doe as an adoptee and you're trying to figure out their identity using biological lineage, you're gonna have a tough damn time.
Oh, I would have never thought about that. You're right.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that's also that I do take into consideration with certain missing persons cases, and like, you know, certain, you know, unidentified persons cases. Like I'm doing a write-up right now about this hiker on the East Coast who has been unidentified for a couple of years now. He went by the moniker Mostly Harmless or Denim. And I think that there is a fairly high possibility that he was an adoptee, and or that he was a foster kid, and that's why nobody's necessarily claimed him or searched for him, because he did mention to some of the other hikers that he had a sister and things of that nature. There are photos of this guy plastered all over the internet, like everywhere, of him just on his hiking trip in various stages of, you know, having facial hair and not having it, you know. So there's literally no reason why this guy shouldn't be identified, unless he was just in and out of, you know, foster care, or his family environment sucked or whatever. Or just there's even the possibility his photo hasn't landed, you know, in front of the right person, to be fair. But it's just, with so much time having passed, I feel like there's definitely a chance that maybe he's, you know, an adoptee or foster kid.
So I wanted to ask earlier, you know, what do you think that we could be doing better for these missing people?
Just keeping their names and their faces out there, honestly, caring about them. You know, just taking in as much of the material about their cases as you can, and being vigilant. If you were in a specific area that a person went missing from around the time they went missing, or anything of that nature, like, you know, don't just try to shove it to the side, because honestly, forgetting people is a big part of why missing persons cases go unsolved. Just their families. This is such an emotionally taxing thing for their families that sometimes it does become easier for them to, you know, just stop searching, because the search just becomes so painful. It seems so hopeless. They lose hope. And that's where I feel community comes in. And with social media especially, we now have this vast networking opportunity to raise awareness for missing persons.
Absolutely.
And it just sucks that, you know, I mean, I hope you're not trying to gain any money off of this video, because anything related to missing persons on YouTube gets immediately demonetized and just, you know, hidden by the algorithm. You know, I'm just saying, it's happened time and time again to a lot of my favorite true crime YouTubers, because the subject matter that they touch is so heavy, and the YouTube algorithm can't, you know, necessarily determine whether or not this is, oh, this content's trying to help people. versus this content's talking about violence.
Mm-hmm. No, not at all. I didn't get to talk to you about that. So, I'm not as much in quarantine as I was before, but I just am, I'm tired of just playing video games and watching Netflix. And I just thought, what is something I could do? And I've been dabbling in YouTube a little bit, and I thought, I want to find people and ask them anything. What can you tell me about? And you were one of the first people that came to my mind, actually, because you're always posting about things like this. And I want to know, could she tell me something interesting about this? Absolutely. That is the only thing I'm in this for. And if
I love that so
bring,
much.
yeah, if I can bring some awareness to something like this or other things, that I would love that. That's all I want from this. It is
Absolutely.
a
And so
much
I'd
better
say,
use of my time.
yeah, and I'd say as far as helping, you are definitely on the right track in that case, because like, I mean, these are things that need to be talked about, not shied away from. And I get that it's subject matter that's heavy and depressing for a lot of people. I totally understand that. A lot of people look at me sideways when I say I look into missing persons. It's kind of a side gig. They're like, you spend your free time doing that? What's wrong with you? And it's just like, yes, I know it's not the easiest thing to digest, but it has to, awareness has to be raised and people need to be looked for. And something I like to ask people, if you went missing, wouldn't you want someone looking for you? If it was your
Exactly.
family member, your friend? I
Exactly.
mean, I've had friends of Erica's reach out to me and just say, "I can't believe somebody's doing this. Thank you." And then they're like, "Wait, have I met you before? Did you know Erica?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Wait, what?" And I'm just like, "Well, I figured nobody who knew her was actively doing anything like this, so why not? Why not take that leap?" And honestly, a lot of my inspiration comes from the people on YouTube I watch and some of the podcasts that I listen to. A great example would be Sarah Turney, her podcast, Voices for Justice. Her sister, Alyssa, went missing in 2001 on May 17th, which is coincidentally the same date that Erica went missing, just, several years beforehand. And Alyssa, there's a very high possibility that she was, murdered by her stepfather, who was Sarah's biological father. And Sarah took up the mantle to seek justice in her sister's case. And currently, as of this year, Michael Roy Turney is sitting in the Arizona Department of Corrections, and he is awaiting trial for the murder of Alyssa Turney. And Sarah fought for years for this. I I cried so freaking hard. I had to shut down my shop at work so that I could have a good cry when that news broke, because she has been fighting so hard, and I can't imagine how overwhelming it must have been for her to be one of the only people in her family fighting for this cause.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, how much time has passed to feel a certain way about that if you are a family member involved.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm so grateful that she didn't have to, necessarily wait a full 20 years, because this year she posted, this is 19 years. Let's not make it 20 without some sort of, movement in this case. And she has achieved that goal, and it is just admirable, the tenacity that she's got. And she's started using her platform to help other families that are kind of in the same boat that she was, where the police were kind of not sure what to do. They were sort of at a loss. They were being a little shady, let's be honest. And so by gaining media exposure, I feel like a lot more missing persons cases could potentially get put back on the front burner of a lot of police departments' radars. Because honestly, community needs to come together on this and just start asking questions and start getting on law enforcement's asses.
Absolutely. I do have sympathy for, them, the law enforcement too, though, because, there's only, they've got a big job to do right now. They're hated,
Mhm.
there's only so much that they can do. I'm not saying, some could be looking and could have looked a little harder. They could have searched a little harder. Some did look as hard as they could, and maybe having more community assistance can help find these people on top of what they're doing.
Mhm. And let's face it, missing persons divisions of law enforcement offices are severely underfunded the vast majority of the time.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Honestly, there's just a lot. I don't know a lot about the inner workings, but I do know that a lot of the times detectives tend to get transferred out of missing persons cases and into other units randomly without any warning to the victims' families. Like, and so suddenly you'll think this particular detective is working a case, and then suddenly, well, no, we had to transfer it to some, greenhorn. Well, this more experienced detective goes off and does other things that are worth his time. You know, it it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense for missing persons like divisions to be treated this way by law enforcement, other than, if it's not happening right now, it's not filling their quota. And it's kind of for some police departments, I do feel like it's a greed game. For other police departments, I feel like it's more a general lack of funding. Like Josephine County, for example, our police department is, oh my goodness. I both sympathize and am infuriated with them, like, simultaneously. It's kind of a hard line to walk, because I did try to file a missing persons report on somebody not that long ago. Donald Johnson, he used to come into my shop all the time, and he was kind of acquaintances with some of my coworkers. He dated one of my former coworkers, and he went missing this August. And when I tried to file the report, I was informed that I couldn't actually file a missing persons report on him because there was a warrant out for his arrest. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. He skipped a court date, and so now we can't file a missing persons report? What? Don's not one to skip court dates. He doesn't give a damn about, like, court dates or fines or anything of that nature. Like, he would have shown up by now. He would have been apprehended by now.
Wouldn't it, make more sense to have that missing persons case out if there was a warrant for his arrest? Wouldn't that just add, so to speak, extra padding on that?
Exactly, but instead it's a note in the warrant.
Only
It's a note that he is missing in the warrant.
If he's found, that would be useful. But
I just don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. It's a bunch of bureaucratic crap, honestly. And I've been kind of up the detective's ass lately on this particular case, just checking in with him fairly regularly. Like, hey, how's it going? Any news on Dawn? I've been keeping an ear out too. Had some people commenting this on Facebook. Here's a screenshot. Go check it out. And sometimes the response is, okay, I'll get on that. Other times the response is just silence until I reach out again. It's very hit and miss. I know the guy's busy, but I also know that Don might be kind of a jerk, but he's still not one of those people that deserves to go missing, And, like, I would reserve that. The people I wouldn't look for are basically, rapists, murderers, people along those lines, chomos. But, for the most part, decent humans, just people doing people things, should be searched for.
And I, ever since, as a kid, you even walk in, say, like, Walmart, and you see there's always like that big wall that's like, oh, these people are missing, and it's always bothered me, like, oh, these people are missing, and it's like kind of what you were brushing on earlier, like, you turn on the news, you hear about one person for weeks for some reason, like, and I'm happy anybody's being searched for at all, like, that's a good thing, but I always thought about, here's this one person that's getting all this exposure, and here's this gigantic wall of all the people that are missing.
Exactly. Like I used to stare at that wall freaking so often. Like we'd be leaving Walmart and my grandma would be like, come on, we got to get to the car. And I'm like, no, I just want to see if I've seen any of these people.
Aww. Yeah. So,
You know, like that's always, you bring that wall up, and that's a very good point as well, that, that the news is very focused on what's going on right now and not on what's happened in the last, month, in the last year, in the
and
last any amount of time.
and maybe if some more light was shined on, the people that you're talking about, the ones that don't get as much exposure, these kidnappees would be more shaking in their boots. Maybe it would happen less. Who knows?
Exactly.
Um, I was going to ask, on an end note, what organizations do you know of that you would like to have some more exposure?
Well, definitely the DNA Project. They are an amazing organization, and I just can't talk about them enough as far as what they do by reuniting Jane and John Does with their families using genetic genealogy. But there's also Private Investigations for the Missing, which was actually started by Bruce Maitland, the father of missing person Brianna Maitland, from somewhere on the East Coast. I always get really fuzzy with the states. I think it's Massachusetts, but I could also be wrong. But her disappearance is a really weird one because her vehicle was found kind of crashed, not necessarily crashed, but like it smacked into the side of this abandoned barn, pretty much.
Yep, I saw that on one of the YouTube videos I was watching about like missing people. I think I know exactly what you're talking about, and they had a picture of it too.
Yeah, well, there's hers, and then there's another one, Maura Murray, and those two disappearances have a lot in common, and they both kind of happened in a fairly similar time frame. So there's a lot of people who think that they might be related.
Oh.
So like that's an interesting one, definitely. And so Brianna's father started private investigations for the missing after the cops who were working his daughter's case kind of reached they hit a wall.
Okay.
And it sort of became up to Bruce and the community to kind of, work on this and get answers. And they still have not gotten answers for Brianna's case, but they're still working on it, which is honestly more than can be said for the police department.
Well, I'm thankful, that there are individuals like yourself and there are organizations that are helping these people. Like as you said, I couldn't imagine if it was myself or a family member. And then with the families being surprised that, people like yourself are helping when you're not related, to me, it's a human being that's gone. Like, where are
Yeah.
they? It's a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Where did they go? That person was walking around, breathing air, having a normal life, and they're just gone.
Exactly.
Human being, not a piece of paper, not your shoe.
Yeah.
It's missing. It's a person.
My boss actually asked if he could take down the missing persons poster that was on the door of our store not that long ago, and my manager stood up and was like, absolutely not. That's a whole ass person. I'm just like, thank you.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Like I've learned a lot myself that I didn't know from what you told me, and that's great. That's one of the only things that I wanted from this. I just wanted to talk to people and learn things, and I hope that our conversation, if it reaches anybody, shed some light on this, because there are points that you've made that I didn't ever think about. I hope that maybe it can help somebody out there. As your boss said, a whole ass person out there.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. I am so glad we could have this conversation.
Yeah.
And, if there's anything else that I could help you with, just let me know.
Yeah, I'm going to, so people know, I'm going to put the descriptions to the organizations in the link below. And I'm going to keep watching out and keep me updated if anything happens. You know, people get found. I'm very interested in the subject now. And that's one of the main reasons for me doing this, so I could learn more about these things. It's important.
Absolutely. We could do an update stream if anything happens.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It was fun.